Hi, this is Matt with LSAT Cracked. In this video, we're going to be introducing you to a family of question stems that I call argument anatomy question stems. What they have in common is you're going to see an argument in the stimulus, but they're not really going to be interested in you evaluating it per se, because generally speaking, it's going to be a good argument. So the point isn't going to be necessarily to find the conclusion and say why it doesn't necessarily follow from the premises. Although, as you'll see, certain parts of our algorithm where we're finding the conclusion are still extremely important. What they're going to want you to do in some of these question stems are either locate the conclusion, find and articulate the conclusion. We'll talk about that in a later video. Or potentially describe what a certain quoted piece of the argument was. So they'll grab a chunk of the argument and they'll ask you what role did that quotation play. Now, it might be the conclusion, either the main or the intermediate conclusion, if there are two. It might be a premise. It might be a concession the argument makes. It might be a piece of background information that the argument and the opposition both take to be true. Or it might be a position that our argument responds to. And we'll look at examples of those later in the course. But the key to realize is, for both of the two things that I've mentioned so far, the key is this, and you're going to notice this in all of the future videos we do on argument anatomy. We're always starting with finding the conclusion. And again, if there are two of them, we'll cover this in a later video, if there are two of them, if you have two conclusions, the very next question is, you're not done yet. The next question is, no, but which one is the main conclusion? You are always hunting for the main conclusion. Everything else, the structure, the way the argument is organized, all ultimately flows to the main conclusion. So if you can understand with confidence what the main conclusion is, and you are able to articulate almost by definition, if you're confident that's the main conclusion, you can then explain to me why every single other piece of the argument is not the main conclusion and what role it plays in either directly or indirectly supporting the main conclusion. So by being able to articulate the main conclusion, you're forcing your brain to make sure that you actually understand what role each of the other pieces is playing, which in a main conclusion question stem will make it so that you can ignore all of those other roles as the correct answer. You're looking for the main conclusion. In a role question stem, you'll already have labeled each of the various pieces sort of implicitly in your mind, and you'll be much faster and more accurate when you're asked to identify that particular snippet of text that they're referring to back in the argument. And when they ask you a method of argument question stem, hey, describe how the argument did its thing, right? You know, because you know the path that it took to get to the main conclusion, which is the thing you've already identified. Finally, if they're asking you to simply parallel another argument, you know what the type of conclusion you need to see in the other argument is, because you've clearly identified it in the stimulus in the starting problem. So again, to recap, we're going to go individual lessons for all of these question stems, but the one thing they all have in common is an intense focus on identifying the main conclusion.